What would you do if the wealthiest walls in New York hid a child's cry no one dared to hear? If this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the rest of this journey. The glass facade of Central Park Tower shimmered against the winter sky, its steel beams piercing into the pale blue like a monument of human ambition. Inside, every corner breathed luxury. Italian marble floors, chandeliers dripping with light, and windows so tall they reflected the city like a restless ocean. But that evening, when David Reynolds stepped out of the elevator after weeks abroad, the silence of his penthouse felt colder than the New York wind outside. David had built empires with numbers, contracts, and sharp decisions. At 43, he was a man accustomed to control. His hair carried the silver of stress. His suits carried the precision of Wall Street, and his eyes, though sharp, carried fatigue. He had returned home earlier than planned, hoping to surprise his family. What he did not expect was the sound that would freeze him on the marble threshold. A cry. Not a tantrum, not a child's whim. It was the cry of a heartbreaking. He dropped his leather briefcase and rushed forward. The sound led him to the living room, where the grandeur of crystal vases and velvet curtains was suddenly reduced to a stage for tragedy. There, on the Persian rug, sat Lily Reynolds, his 6-year-old daughter, her small arms trembling as they wrapped protectively around her baby brother Noah, only 8 months old. Her pink dress, once a gift from her grandmother, was torn at the hem and stained. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered through sobs, "Please don't hurt us. Please." David's chest clenched so hard he could barely breathe. His feet felt nailed to the ground. He had never heard such desperation in her voice. Standing only a few feet away was Vanessa Cole, his second wife. Blonde, elegant, dressed in silk, as though she had just stepped out of a Fifth Avenue boutique. She froze when she noticed him. Her face, a mask of annoyance a second earlier, melted instantly into a picture of concern. "Oh, David!" she exclaimed, rushing forward with arms outstretched. "You're home early. The children were just upset. You know how difficult bedtime can be." But David's eyes were not on her. They were on Lily, on the way her little fingers clung to Noah's blanket, the way her lips quivered in silence after begging for mercy. The room smelled faintly of baby powder and lavender candles, yet something acrid hung beneath it, the unmistakable stench of fear. "Lily," David said softly, kneeling on the rug. His voice cracked despite his effort to stay calm. "Sweetheart, what happened?" Lily pressed her face against Noah's curls, refusing to look up. Her shoulders shook violently. Noah whimpered, sensing the storm around him. Vanessa stepped in quickly, her manicured nails grazing David's shoulder. "David, darling, children dramatize." She fell, and when I raised my voice, she panicked. That's all. You know how sensitive she is. But David was no longer the man who nodded blindly to explanations. He had been away for nearly a month, flying between Zurich, London, and Dubai, chasing investments, chasing legacies. Tonight, those pursuits felt hollow compared to the sight before him. He reached out to lift Lily's chin gently. That's when he noticed it, the faint bruise along her wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve. His breath left him in a hiss. "Who did this?" His voice was no longer soft. It carried the steel that once silenced boardrooms. Lily's lips parted, but no words came. She only shook her head, eyes wide like a trapped bird. Vanessa interjected smoothly. "Oh, David, for heaven's sake. She bumped into the stair railing earlier. I told her to be more careful." She forced a laugh, though it rang hollow against the high ceiling. For a moment, the weight of silence pressed down on everyone. Even the hum of the city below seemed to vanish. From the corner, the housekeeper, Maggie Foster, stood frozen, her hands wringing the hem of her apron. She was 62, her back slightly bent, but her presence steady, a remnant from the days when Grace, David's first wife, was still alive. Her eyes flicked from Lily to David, then to Vanessa, carrying a story she dared not yet speak. "Sir," Maggie murmured at last, her voice low but heavy with meaning, "perhaps you should rest. The children need calm." David's gaze darted to her. There was something in her eyes, something like warning. But before he could question, Vanessa clapped her hands lightly. "Enough drama," she declared, forcing brightness into her tone. "It's late. Let's put the children to bed. Tomorrow will be better." But nothing felt better. The image of Lily's trembling body and Noah's wide, frightened eyes burned into David's mind. As Vanessa whisked herself away toward the kitchen, heels clicking against marble, David gathered both children into his arms. Lily clung to him, her tiny fingers gripping his suit as though he were her last anchor in the world. And for the first time in years, the millionaire who thought he owned everything realized he had been blind to the only treasure that mattered. He pressed a kiss to Lily's hair, whispering so only she could hear, "I'm here now." Yet deep inside, a terrible truth gnawed at him. If he had arrived home even a minute later, what might he have missed? The city outside continued its restless hum, but in the heart of Central Park Tower, one man's perfect life had just cracked open, revealing the darkness within. Morning light spilled into the penthouse like liquid gold, catching on the edges of glass and silver. For anyone standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York appeared eternal. Central Park stretched like a green heartbeat below, and the skyscrapers shimmered with ambition. To strangers, this home was paradise. But for David Reynolds, the beauty of the view could not erase the image from the night before. Lily clutching Noah, whispering for mercy. Sleep had barely touched him. He had spent the night lying awake on the edge of his king-sized bed, his children curled up beside him, their small breaths uneven. Lily had flinched even in her dreams while Noah whimpered every hour. Each sound was a blade against David's chest. When dawn came, he carried them gently to the breakfast table. The room was immaculate as always. Fresh lilies arranged in vases, china polished, silverware aligned like soldiers. Vanessa Cole stood by the espresso machine, silk robe tied neatly, hair falling in perfect waves. She turned, her smile poised, as if last night's scene had never existed. "Darling," she said sweetly, placing a kiss in the air, not daring to brush his cheek. "What a surprise to wake up and see you home. The children must be thrilled." Her voice dripped with honey, but David noticed how Lily froze in her chair, the spoon slipping slightly in her small hand. She stared at her cereal as though it might swallow her whole. When the spoon clattered, David reached for it, his fingers brushing over hers. He felt her trembling. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the movement, her smile faltering for a second before snapping back. "Children are clumsy," she said quickly, sipping her coffee. "They need firm hands. Grace was too soft on them. May her soul rest." The mention of Grace, his late wife, was a wound David had learned to bury, but hearing her name in Vanessa's mouth used as a weapon sparked something in him. He set the spoon down carefully. "Firm hands don't leave bruises," he said evenly, his gaze steady. For a split second, Vanessa's eyes hardened, ice over fire. But then she laughed lightly, dismissing his words. "Oh, David, you've been away too long. You're seeing things that aren't there. Children bruise themselves all the time." The air grew heavy. Even Noah, in his high chair, sensed the tension and let out a soft whine. That's when Maggie Foster, the housekeeper, stepped into the room. She carried a tray of toast, her hands steady, but her eyes fixed on David. There was something in her gaze, a quiet plea, a warning that spoke louder than words. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," Maggie said gently. The children didn't eat much last night. They're hungry. Vanessa's smile sharpened. Maggie, thank you, but I had it under control. Maggie bowed her head slightly, but David caught the flicker of defiance in her eyes. She placed the toast in front of Lily, who looked up at her with gratitude too large for her small frame. David leaned back in his chair, studying everything. The way Vanessa's fingers tightened around her cup. The way Lily hunched her shoulders as if to make herself invisible. The way Maggie's presence seemed to be the only safe harbor. The perfection of his household had always been Vanessa's triumph. She hosted fundraisers with politicians, curated art for their walls, kept their names in society columns. But beneath that veneer, David now saw cracks, hairline fractures that, once noticed, could not be ignored. After breakfast, Vanessa glided toward him, slipping her hand over his arm. David, we should talk about the gala next week. The mayor is attending. We must present a united front. Her perfume, expensive jasmine and musk, filled his nose, but he smelled something else beneath it. Desperation. He removed her hand slowly. We will talk later, he said curtly. Her smile tightened. For the briefest moment, anger burned in her eyes. And then, like a curtain falling, it was gone. Later that afternoon, as David walked through the corridor lined with portraits and oil paintings Grace had once chosen, he heard the faintest sound, a small voice singing. Following it, he found Lily sitting on the floor of her room, rocking Noah in her lap. She wasn't smiling. The song was a lullaby spoken through cracked innocence. Sweetheart, David whispered, crouching beside her. Does it hurt when you eat? He pointed gently to her wrist, where the faint bruise darkened against her pale skin. She froze, lips pressing together, eyes darting toward the door. And then, in the smallest voice, she answered, Daddy, if I tell you, she'll hurt Noah. The words pierced him deeper than any corporate betrayal ever had. His throat tightened until he could barely speak. No one will hurt you, he promised, his voice trembling. Not while I'm here. But even as he spoke, he knew promises were fragile things. Vanessa was cunning, and the law was slow. That evening, the family gathered for dinner in the grand dining hall. Vanessa's charm was on full display. She poured wine, laughed at her own jokes, and complimented David's return as if the house had missed him desperately. To an outsider, she looked like the perfect wife. Yet beneath the table, David felt Lily's small hand slip into his. It was clammy, shaking. When he squeezed, she squeezed back, her eyes never lifting from her plate. Across the table, Maggie caught the gesture. She didn't smile. She only nodded, ever so slightly, as if to say, You see now. You finally see. For David, the illusion of perfection had shattered. Behind Vanessa's smile was a shadow that threatened to swallow his children whole. And for the first time, he realized the battle ahead would not be fought in boardrooms or ballrooms, but within the very walls of his home. The night in Central Park Tower was unusually still. From the 65th floor, the hum of Manhattan was only a faint murmur, muffled by glass and distance. Yet inside the Reynolds penthouse, a storm was silently brewing. David Reynolds sat in his study, staring at documents he could no longer comprehend. His empire, contracts, investments, assets worth billions, lay scattered across the mahogany desk. But for the first time in his life, none of it mattered. His mind replayed only one thing, the bruise on Lily's wrist, the way she flinched at Vanessa's touch, and the words whispered in terror. If I tell, she'll hurt Noah. Closing his eyes, he pressed his palms to his temples. Numbers had always given him clarity. Now they felt like chains, binding him to a life that blinded him from what mattered most. It was close to midnight when he rose and stepped into the hallway. The penthouse stretched long and cavernous, its walls adorned with abstract art. Vanessa adored, but David had never cared for. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume lingering from dinner. That's when he heard it. Soft voices near the stairwell that led down to the private gym and guest suites. He froze, every nerve taut. It was Vanessa's voice. Low, sharp, like the hiss of a blade. "You listen to me, little girl," she whispered. "If you ever tell your father what happens when he's gone, I'll throw you and your baby brother out on the street. Do you understand?" David's blood ran cold. He stepped closer, pressing himself against the wall. His heart hammered so loudly he feared it would give him away. I won't say anything," Lily stammered, her voice trembling. "Please don't hurt Noah." A silence followed. Then Vanessa's heels clicked once against the stair marble. "Good. Remember, your father may love you, but he can't protect you when he's not here. I can make you disappear before he ever notices." The sound of footsteps faded as Vanessa walked away. For a moment, David couldn't breathe. The weight of her words sank into him like poison. His hand clutched the stair railing, knuckles whitening. Rage surged through him, an anger fiercer than anything he had ever felt in boardrooms or battles for power. But beneath it was guilt, corrosive and undeniable. He had left his children vulnerable. He had trusted the wrong person. And now Lily was living in fear inside what was supposed to be her sanctuary. As the silence stretched, David peeked around the corner. Lily stood on the stairwell landing, clutching Noah's blanket in her tiny hands. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She was shaking so hard he thought she might collapse. "Lily!" His voice cracked, breaking the quiet. She gasped, spinning toward him. For an instant, fear flickered across her face, fear that even her father might turn away. But David knelt on the cold marble steps, opening his arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as though Vanessa might still be lurking in the shadows. Then, with a choked sob, she ran into his embrace. David held her tightly, her small frame trembling against him. He smoothed her hair, whispering words he wished could erase every wound. "I heard everything. I know. And I swear to you no one will ever hurt you again." Lily buried her face into his shoulder. "Daddy, I'm scared she'll hurt Noah when you're gone." David swallowed hard. His throat burned, his eyes stung. "She won't touch him. She won't touch either of you, not ever again." In that moment, the man who had once defined his worth by skyscrapers and market shares understood what true failure meant. Not a failed deal, but failing to see the terror in his child's eyes. When Lily's sobs quieted, David carried her back toward her room, Noah still sleeping in his crib. He tucked her beneath the covers, sitting by her side until her eyes fluttered closed. But long after his children drifted into uneasy sleep, David remained awake. He paced the hall, replaying Vanessa's threats in his mind, every word carved deeper into his resolve. He realized now this was not suspicion. It was truth. And truth demanded action. The perfect wife who charmed Manhattan society was nothing more than a predator in silk. The family he thought he had rebuilt after Grace's death was a fragile illusion, one that hid rot beneath its surface. As the city lights blinked through the windows, David stood at the stairwell once more. His hand pressed against the cool railing where he had first heard the whispers. He felt the weight of choice pressing down on him, to ignore, to delay, or to fight. For Lily, for Noah, and perhaps in some distant way, for Grace, whose absence had left him vulnerable to this darkness. David clenched his fists. The man who once built towers of steel and glass would now build something stronger, a shield for his children. The war inside his home had begun. The following evening, the penthouse seemed quieter than usual. The chandeliers still spilled golden light across the marble floors. The portraits still hung with grandeur on the walls, and the skyline still glittered beyond the vast windows. But to David Reynolds, none of it looked the same. The stairwell whispers still rang in his ears like a curse. He had spent the day at home, postponing meetings and ignoring calls from Zurich and London. For the first time in years, business was no longer his priority. His eyes never left his children. He shadowed Lily as she colored at the kitchen table, kept Noah close in his arms, and caught the way both of them tensed whenever Vanessa entered the room. By nightfall, David's decision was clear. He needed the truth, spoken aloud, without masks or shadows. And there was only one person in this house who had lived long enough to know it. Maggie Foster, the housekeeper who had served this family for 2 decades. He found her in the laundry room, folding Lily's small dresses with steady, calloused hands. Her back was slightly hunched from years of service, her graying hair pinned neatly, but her eyes, those eyes were sharp with secrets. "Maggie," David began softly, leaning against the doorframe. She looked up, startled, as though caught in a crime. "Mr. Reynolds, I didn't hear you come in." David stepped closer. "I need you to tell me the truth. About Vanessa." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Maggie's fingers stilled on the fabric. She inhaled deeply, her shoulders trembling as though carrying a weight far too heavy. "Sir," she whispered, "you don't know what you're asking." David's voice was low but firm. "I heard her last night, Maggie, threatening Lily, promising to throw her and Noah out on the street." "I need to know everything. No more half-truths. If you care about these children, you must tell me." Maggie turned her face away, blinking hard. "I've tried, Mr. Reynolds. I left clues, small warnings, but you were always gone, always too busy chasing meetings and towers." Her voice cracked with sorrow. "I promised Grace I would protect them. But I'm only a housekeeper, and Vanessa, she is dangerous." The name of his late wife, Grace Reynolds, landed on David's heart like a stone. He stepped forward, gripping Maggie's arm gently. "What did you promise, Grace?" Maggie closed her eyes. "That I would watch over Lily and any child that followed. Grace knew she was ill during her second pregnancy. Before she passed, she begged me never to let harm come to them. I swore it." Her eyes opened, burning now with conviction. "And I have seen too much, sir, more than I can keep silent about." David's throat tightened. "Tell me." The words poured out like water breaking through a dam. "She forces Lily to stand outside on the balcony in the cold when you're away, barefoot with no coat. She waters down Noah's formula so he'll cry and exhaust himself to sleep. She locks their door at night so Lily can't get to her brother when he wakes. And if Lily resists..." Vanessa raises her hand. David's stomach churned. Rage coiled in him, violent and unrelenting. His fists clenched, his knuckles white. Maggie's voice shook as she continued. "Lily doesn't eat properly anymore. She lives in fear of every step Vanessa takes. And Noah, he's just a baby. He doesn't understand, but he feels it. That's why he cries more when you're gone." David's breath came heavy, his chest rising and falling like a man struggling for air. For a lifetime, he had thought himself a protector, a provider. But Maggie's testimony revealed the brutal truth. He had been absent, and in his absence, cruelty had taken root under his own roof. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he demanded, though his voice cracked with guilt. Tears welled in Maggie's eyes. "I tried, sir. Subtle ways. But Vanessa threatened me too." She told me if I ever spoke against her, I'd be out on the street before dawn, and Lily would pay the price. I stayed because I thought my presence might shield them a little, but it hasn't been enough." David lowered his head, shame burning through him. "I failed them." Maggie reached out, placing her weathered hand on his. "No, sir. You were blinded by grief. Losing Grace left you vulnerable, and Vanessa knew how to step into that wound. But it is not too late. Not if you act now." Her words, steady and unflinching, cut through his despair like light through a storm. David straightened. "Will you testify, if this goes to court?" Maggie nodded, her jaw tight. "For the children, yes. I will stand before any judge and tell the truth. I owe that to Grace. I owe it to Lily and Noah." David closed his eyes, the memory of Grace's gentle smile rising in his mind. Her voice seemed to echo faintly. "Believe in your child's eyes when she is afraid. She will not know how to lie." He opened his eyes, filled now with a resolve that felt like steel. "Thank you, Maggie. From this moment forward, I will not leave them unprotected again." As he left the laundry room, David passed through the hallway where portraits of Grace still hung. He stopped before one, her image, serene, holding a young Lily in her arms. He lifted his hand, brushing the frame with trembling fingers. "Grace," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was blind, but I see now. I promise you, I will fight for them. I will not fail our children again." And in the quiet of the penthouse, with Maggie's testimony burning in his heart, David knew the battle lines had been drawn. Vanessa's mask was cracking, and soon the world would see what lurked beneath. The penthouse was quiet that night, but quiet did not mean peace. David Reynolds walked the halls alone, his thoughts too loud to let him rest. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with ghosts, the faint laughter of Grace, the gentle steps of Lily as a toddler, the baby cries of Noah still ringing from the nursery. The truth Maggie had confessed sat heavy on his chest. He had spent decades believing his wealth could shield his family. Yet no fortress of steel or glass could protect the innocence of his children when he himself had been blind. His feet carried him, almost instinctively, to a door he had not opened in years. Grace's room. It had remained untouched since the day she died, just after Noah's birth, when blood loss had claimed her life. David had ordered the staff to seal it, unable to face the memories inside. Tonight, though, the weight of his failures pulled him here. With trembling fingers, he turned the brass handle. The air smelled faintly of lavender, though the perfume had long since faded. Sunlight from the city's neon lights spilled through sheer curtains, illuminating a room that seemed frozen in time. Her dressing table still held bottles of perfume, her journals stacked neatly, a framed photo of Lily as a toddler smiling beside her mother. David's breath hitched, his knees weakened. He moved toward the bed, his hand brushing against the quilt she once loved. Beneath the pillow, his fingers caught something brittle, an envelope, yellowed with years but still intact. His name was written across it in Grace's delicate script. "For David, if I am gone." His heart pounded. With shaking hands, he tore it open. Grace's words poured out, each one piercing him deeper than any boardroom betrayal or corporate war could. "David, my love, if you are reading this, then my time with you has ended. I pray you forgive me for leaving you and our children. I worry most for Lily, for she will remember me, and for the little one who will never know my voice. Please promise me this. Believe in your child's eyes when she is afraid. She will not know how to lie. Do not dismiss her fears as imagination. Protect them, David, for I will not be there to do so." David pressed the letter to his chest, choking back sobs. But the letter continued. I must also warn you. Trust is fragile. Not all who enter your life after me will hold your children's hearts with care. I have arranged with the Boston Family Trust to secure a portion of our assets for the children, should anything ever threaten them. Guard it well. Guard them more. Remember, their safety, their smiles, are worth more than every tower you build. By the time he reached the end, David was on his knees beside the bed, tears falling freely. He had failed Grace's plea once, blind to the bruises, deaf to the cries, but not again. Not ever again. His sobs broke into the silence. Memories rushed back, Grace holding Lily in the garden, her laughter echoing, Grace cradling Noah in her final moments, whispering to him though she was already fading. He pressed his forehead to the quilt. Grace, I see now. I should have listened, but I swear to you I will not fail again. I will protect them with everything I have left. The letter, fragile but enduring, was more than words. It was a map, a reminder that Grace had seen further than he did, had feared what he refused to imagine, and now her voice from beyond the grave became his compass. When he finally rose, the letter clutched in his hand, a new strength filled him. His reflection in the mirror looked older, wearier, but there was fire in his eyes. The same fire he once used to conquer Wall Street was now sharpened for a nobler cause. He stepped into the hallway where the city lights glowed against the windows. Outside, New York carried on with its endless noise. Taxis, sirens, laughter in the streets below. Inside, David Reynolds made a vow. No more absences. No more blindness. From this night forward, he would be present, vigilant, and relentless in protecting Lily and Noah. He folded Grace's letter and slipped it into his pocket. It would remain with him always, a reminder of the woman he had loved, the promises he had broken, and the ones he now swore to keep. As he returned to his children's room, he found Lily asleep, her small hand curled protectively around Noah's blanket. David sat at the edge of the bed, watching them breathe. He brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face and whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart. I will fight for you. I will fight for both of you." In the dim light, the words of Grace's letter echoed once more in his mind. Believe in your child's eyes when she is afraid. David closed his eyes, clutching his daughter's hand. For the first time in years, he felt purpose burning in his chest, not the hollow drive for wealth, but the sacred duty of a father. The winter moon hung above Manhattan like a pale coin, casting its light across Central Park Tower. Inside the penthouse, silence ruled the night, broken only by the hum of the heating vents and the occasional distant honk from the city below. But in David Reynolds's heart, silence was impossible. His mind echoed with Grace's letter, Maggie's testimony, and Vanessa's threats. He had begun checking on the children every hour, unable to sleep. Tonight, sometime after midnight, he moved down the corridor to the nursery. The polished hardwood creaked under his weight, though the house itself seemed to hold its breath. When he reached Lily and Noah's door, he stopped. His hand pressed the knob. It didn't turn. The door was locked. A surge of panic shot through him. He rattled it, harder, then pounded once against the wood. "Lily? Noah?" From inside he heard it, a muffled cry, Lily's voice, choked and small. "Daddy?" The sound pierced him. Rage boiled. With a single slam of his shoulder, the lock gave way, the door flying open. Inside, Lily crouched beside Noah's crib, her tiny body shielding her brother. Her face was wet with tears, her hands trembling as if she had been trying to comfort the baby through her own terror. Noah whimpered, his fists clenching and unclenching. David rushed forward, scooping them both into his arms. He kissed Lily's damp hair, cradled Noah against his chest. His voice shook as he whispered, "I'm here. I've got you." Lily clung to him so tightly it hurt. Between sobs, she whispered words that shattered him. "Dad, are you going to abandon us like she said?" David froze. The question ripped through every defense he had ever built. For years, he had buried himself in business trips and negotiations, convincing himself that providing wealth was enough. But now, in his daughter's trembling voice, he heard the real cost of his absence, fear that her own father might walk away. Tears blurred his vision. He pressed his forehead against hers. "No, Lily, no, I will never abandon you. I will never leave you again. Do you hear me?" She sniffled, nodding weakly, but her grip on him didn't loosen. He carried them into his own bedroom, laying them carefully on his bed. Lily refused to release his arm, so he let her hold him, sitting there with Noah in his lap until both children's breathing steadied. But David did not sleep. He sat upright, staring into the darkness, every sense alert. Vanessa's cruelty was no longer hidden. It had invaded his children's most sacred space, locking them away like prisoners. This was no longer neglect. It was warfare. As dawn crept across the skyline, casting streaks of orange across the city, David resolved that this would be the last night his children ever lived in fear. When Lily stirred awake, she blinked at him, confusion softening into relief that he was still there. "You didn't go," she whispered. David kissed her forehead. "I won't ever again." At breakfast, Vanessa emerged from the master suite in silk pajamas, yawning as though nothing were amiss. She arched an eyebrow at the sight of Lily and Noah beside David at the table. "Did they wake you?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Children can be restless at night." David's gaze was unflinching. "They were locked in their room." For the briefest second, her face froze. Then she laughed, smooth as glass. "Oh, the lock must have turned on its own. You know how these old fixtures can be." David leaned forward, his voice low, every syllable sharp. "Don't lie to me." The air thickened. Vanessa's smile faltered, but she turned away, pouring herself coffee as though dismissing him. But David knew. He had seen too much, heard too much, and he had his children's eyes, the very eyes Grace had told him never to doubt, confirming everything. Later, when the children napped in his room, David returned to the broken nursery door. He touched the cracked frame, the splintered wood, and something within him hardened. This was no longer about suspicion, no longer about doubt. It was about survival, his children's survival, and he would not hesitate. That evening, as he tucked Lily into bed beside Noah, she whispered again, "Daddy, will she try to hurt us again?" David held her close, his own tears slipping silently down his cheek. "Not while I breathe, Lily. Not while I breathe." The city glimmered that evening, its towers lit like 1,000 candles against the velvet sky. Yet inside the Reynolds penthouse, the lights burned colder, reflecting not celebration, but tension. David Reynolds had invited an old friend, Thomas Carter, a lawyer who had stood by him through business triumphs and personal grief, for dinner. It was no ordinary invitation. Tonight would be a test, a stage where truth and lies would collide. The dining table was set with silver and crystal, Vanessa's handiwork. Every fork gleamed, every wine glass shimmered. To anyone walking in, it would look like a picture of elegance. But David's chest tightened as he watched Vanessa glide through the room, her smile polished to perfection, her gestures dripping with charm. Thomas arrived just after 7, his overcoat still dusted with Manhattan's early snow. He was a man of steady presence, gray streaking his temples, his eyes both sharp and kind. He clasped David's hand firmly. "It's been too long, my friend. I was worried when you canceled all those meetings." David forced a smile. "Some things matter more than meetings." Vanessa approached, her silk gown shimmering. She kissed Thomas on the cheek with theatrical warmth. "Thomas, it's been ages. You must join us more often. David gets far too serious when you're not around." Thomas chuckled politely, though his eyes flicked to David, sensing the undercurrent. He had known David long enough to recognize when storms brewed beneath his calm exterior. Dinner began with fine wine and roasted lamb, the kind of meal Vanessa prided herself on hosting. She laughed at Thomas's jokes, refilled his glass, and carried herself with the ease of a socialite born to the stage. To an outsider, she was flawless. But David wasn't watching the act. He was watching Lily. The little girl sat stiffly in her chair, her small hands folded tightly in her lap. Every time Vanessa's hand brushed near her, Lily's shoulders tensed. When she reached for her fork, David noticed her fingers shake. And then it happened. While Thomas was describing a case from the Manhattan courthouse, Vanessa leaned toward Lily, her smile never breaking. Her lips barely moved, but David caught it. "One word," she whispered, "and your brother pays." Lily's fork slipped from her hand. It clattered against the plate, echoing too loudly in the silent pause. She froze, eyes wide, face pale. David's chest constricted. He had seen it, heard it. There was no mistaking the venom beneath Vanessa's honeyed tone. Thomas looked between them, brows furrowed, but Vanessa recovered instantly. "Oh, sweetheart," she cooed to Lily. "Clumsy again?" "It's fine, darling. Accidents happen." She lifted the fork with a laugh, her charm undisturbed. David's jaw clenched. He had seen enough. When dinner ended and Maggie cleared the table, David walked Thomas to the study for a private conversation. Vanessa followed briefly, offering coffee, but David's voice cut sharp. "Vanessa, give us a moment." Her smile wavered, then returned. "Of course." She turned gracefully, though David caught the flash of fury in her eyes before the door shut. Thomas leaned against the desk, studying him. "David, what's going on?" David exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "It's Vanessa. She's not what you think. She's hurting the children, Thomas, threatening them, locking them in their room. Maggie has witnessed it all." His voice shook with anger. "And tonight, she threatened Lily right in front of us." Thomas's eyes hardened. "That's not discipline. That's abuse." David nodded. "I want to take action. I need custody secured. I need Vanessa removed before she destroys them." Thomas straightened. "Then you'll need evidence. Maggie's testimony is strong, but we'll need more. Photos, medical records, anything. If Lily is brave enough, her voice could be powerful, but we cannot put her through more trauma unless absolutely necessary." David's fists clenched. "I won't let her suffer one more day." The door burst open. Vanessa stood there, her face flushed, her mask cracked at last. "So this is what you've been plotting?" she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Whispering to your lawyer behind my back, trying to destroy me?" David turned slowly, his expression like stone. "Destroy you? No, Vanessa, you did that yourself." Her eyes blazed. "Don't you dare take their side against me. Those children—" Her voice broke into a shout. "I hate those children because they look like her." The room froze. Her words hung heavy in the air, thick with venom. Thomas's jaw tightened. He looked at David, then at Vanessa, and shook his head slowly. "You just admitted it yourself." David stepped forward, his voice trembling with controlled rage. "Grace gave you nothing but kindness, and now you dare to hate her children for existing?" Vanessa's breath came fast, her chest heaving. For a moment, she looked less like the flawless socialite and more like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. "Be careful, David," she spat. "You think you can humiliate me? Take everything from me? I won't let you win." David's voice was low, deadly calm. "This isn't about winning. It's about protecting my children, and nothing will stop me." Vanessa stormed out, her heels striking the marble like gunfire. The slam of the door reverberated through the penthouse. Thomas turned to David, his face grave. "You need to act quickly. Tonight showed us the truth, but the law will need every shred of proof. I'll prepare the filings for family court. We'll move fast, but you must be ready for a fight." David looked toward the hallway where his children slept, his heart breaking and burning all at once. "I'm ready," he whispered. "For them, I'm ready for anything." The marble steps of the Manhattan family court gleamed under the pale morning sun. Reporters gathered outside, their cameras ready, though none yet knew the storm that was about to break. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of paper, polish, and the weight of too many broken families. For David Reynolds, billionaire and father, this was no business meeting. It was war. But this time, the battlefield was not Wall Street. It was the courtroom where his children's future would be decided. By his side stood Thomas Carter, briefcase in hand, his calm presence anchoring David's storm of emotions. Behind them, Maggie Foster walked slowly, her spine straight despite the nerves etched into her lined face. She carried years of memories and the courage of a promise made to Grace. David bent down to Lily, who clutched Noah's blanket tightly as they entered the courthouse. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Daddy, is she going to be there?" David smoothed her hair. "Yes, sweetheart. But you don't have to be afraid. You have me. You have Maggie. And you have the truth. That's stronger than anything." The heavy doors swung open. At the far table sat Vanessa Cole, elegant as ever in a tailored suit, her hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her attorney, a sharp-faced man in a navy suit, whispered in her ear, but Vanessa's eyes stayed locked on David, burning with fury and defiance. The judge entered. Honorable Catherine Brooks, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor and sharp sense of justice. The courtroom rose, then settled into tense silence. "Case number 4827, the clerk announced. Reynolds v. Cole, petition for custody and allegations of abuse." David's heart pounded, but his resolve did not waver. This was the moment. Thomas stood first. "Your Honor, we submit that the children of David Reynolds, namely Lily Reynolds, age 6, and Noah Reynolds, age 8 months, have been subjected to repeated acts of cruelty, neglect, and abuse by their stepmother, Vanessa Cole. We will provide testimony and evidence to substantiate these claims." Vanessa's attorney rose, his voice smooth but dripping with arrogance. "Your Honor, these allegations are exaggerated fabrications. Mr. Reynolds is attempting to malign my client's reputation and seize control of all marital assets under the guise of protecting his children." Judge Brooks raised a hand. "We will hear the witnesses. Proceed." Maggie Foster was called first. She walked slowly to the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she swore her oath. David felt his chest tighten. This woman had been with his family since before Lily could walk. Now she stood ready to risk everything for the truth. Her voice, though quiet, carried strength. "I have served the Reynolds family for over 20 years. I was there when Grace Reynolds was alive, and I promised her I would protect her children. I witnessed Ms. Cole forcing Lily to stand barefoot outside on freezing nights. I saw her dilute baby Noah's formula until he cried from hunger. I have seen her lock the children in their room and strike Lily when she resisted." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa's lawyer objected, claiming hearsay, but Judge Brooks waved it aside. "The witness is testifying from direct observation. Overruled. David felt tears sting his eyes as Maggie continued. I stayed because I thought my presence might shield them, but it hasn't been enough. That's why I'm here today. For the children. When Maggie stepped down, her gaze met David's. It carried the weight of Grace's promise, now shared between them. Then came the moment David both dreaded and prayed for. Lily was called to the stand. The courtroom fell silent as the little girl in a simple blue dress walked nervously to the witness chair. She clutched Noah's blanket in her hands like armor. Judge Brooks leaned forward, her tone gentle. Sweetheart, do you know why you're here today? Lily's voice trembled. Because I don't want my little brother to grow up in fear. David's throat closed. He gripped the table to keep from breaking down. Thomas approached softly, careful with his questions. Lily, can you tell us how you feel when you're with your stepmother? Lily's eyes flicked toward Vanessa, then back down to the blanket. Her small voice filled the silence. She scares me. She said if I told Daddy what she does, she'd hurt Noah. Sometimes she locks us in, sometimes she makes me stand outside when it's cold. The courtroom was frozen. Even the reporters' pens paused. And how do you feel with your father? Thomas asked gently. Lily's lips quivered, but her answer was steady. Safe. That single word pierced through the silence like a bell. Vanessa shot to her feet, her composure finally shattering. She's lying! That child is manipulating all of you! She screamed, her voice echoing against the marble walls. Judge Brooks banged her gavel sharply. Ms. Cole, sit down, or you will be removed from this courtroom. But Vanessa continued, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. They're turning them against me. David is poisoning them. I gave up everything for this family, and this is how they repay me? Two bailiffs moved forward as Vanessa fought against her attorney's grip. She pointed at David, her face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. You hear me, David? You took everything from me. The judge's gavel slammed again, the crack like thunder. Order! The room fell into uneasy silence. David rose, walking slowly to Lily as she stepped down from the witness stand. He knelt, taking her trembling hands into his. You were so brave, he whispered. Mommy Grace would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. Lily nodded, her tears soaking the blanket. Noah cooed softly from Maggie's arms, unaware of the storm around him. Judge Brooks cleared her throat. This court has heard enough for today. Testimony has been entered, and evidence will be reviewed. We will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments and a ruling. The gavel fell once more. David held his daughter close as the courtroom emptied. He knew the battle wasn't finished, but the tide had turned. The truth, once buried beneath Vanessa's smiles and lies, now stood in the open for all to see. The next morning, Manhattan Family Court was brimming with tension. Snow flurries swirled outside the courthouse windows, muffling the noise of the city. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but quiet. Lawyers shuffled papers, reporters leaned forward with pens poised, and the gallery buzzed with anticipation. For David Reynolds, every breath felt heavy. He had faced hostile takeovers, global financial crises, and boardroom betrayals, but nothing had ever tested him like this. At stake now was not a fortune or reputation, it was the lives of Lily and Noah, the only treasures that truly mattered. At his side, Thomas Carter adjusted his tie, his calm eyes betraying quiet determination. Behind them, Maggie Foster held Noah in her arms, her presence steady as stone. Lily sat beside her father, clutching his hand, her small face pale but resolute. Across the aisle, Vanessa Cole sat rigid, her hair pulled tight, her tailored suit immaculate. Yet the polished facade was cracked. Her eyes burned with fury, her jaw clenched with the desperation of a cornered predator. Her lawyer whispered furiously in her ear, but Vanessa's gaze never left David. The bailiff called the room to order as Judge Catherine Brooks entered. Her gavel struck once, silencing the crowd.
"We reconvene for final arguments and judgment in the matter of Reynolds v. Cole," she declared. Thomas rose first, his voice steady. "Your Honor, yesterday this court heard powerful testimony from a long-serving housekeeper who witnessed years of cruelty and from a child who bravely spoke the truth despite threats. The evidence is clear. Vanessa Cole subjected Lily and Noah Reynolds to abuse, neglect, and intimidation. These children deserve safety. They deserve love. They deserve a father who will protect them." He paused, then glanced at David. "And they have that father in David Reynolds." The gallery murmured. David's throat tightened. Vanessa's attorney stood next, adjusting his cufflinks with a flourish. "Your Honor, my client categorically denies these claims. Children are impressionable. They can be coached. The housekeeper has motive to fabricate, perhaps for favor or inheritance. My client has been a loyal wife, managing the household with grace. What we see here is a calculated attempt by Mr. Reynolds to sever her rights and secure complete control of both assets and children." Judge Brooks nodded gravely, her face unreadable. "Thank you, counsel. Ms. Cole, do you wish to speak before I render judgment?" Vanessa rose, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. She placed her manicured hand over her heart, her voice trembling with feigned sincerity. "Your Honor, I only ever wanted what was best for this family. Those children never respected me. They clung to the memory of Grace, a ghost I could never compete with. Yes, I was strict, but discipline is not abuse. I am the victim here, painted as a monster because I could not replace their sainted mother." Her words echoed coldly. Lily shrank against David, her tiny fingers tightening around his sleeve. David pulled her close, his own anger rising like a tide. Judge Brooks tapped her gavel lightly, eyes sharp. "Thank you. I have heard enough." The courtroom stilled. The judge's voice cut clear as glass. "Based on testimony and evidence presented, this court finds that Ms. Vanessa Cole did indeed engage in acts of cruelty and neglect toward the minor children, Lily and Noah Reynolds. Effective immediately, all custodial rights of Ms. Cole are suspended." Gasps filled the room, Vanessa's face drained of color. Judge Brooks continued. "Full physical and legal custody of Lily and Noah Reynolds is granted to their father, David Reynolds. Furthermore, evidence of abuse and financial misconduct presented during these proceedings will be referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." Vanessa shot to her feet, her mask finally shattering. "You can't do this! You can't take everything from me!" she screamed, her voice wild with rage. Her lawyer tried to restrain her, but she shook him off, pointing a trembling finger at David. "You'll regret this, David. You'll regret the day you turned them against me." David rose slowly, gathering Lily into his arms, his voice steady but fierce. "I didn't take anything from you, Vanessa. I kept what matters." The courtroom erupted, reporters scribbling furiously, whispers filling the air, bailiffs moving swiftly to escort Vanessa out as she thrashed and cursed. Through it all, David stood firm, his daughter clinging to him, his son safe in Maggie's embrace. For the first time since Grace's death, he felt the weight of failure lift from his shoulders. He had fought, not with contracts or power, but with the truth. And the truth had won. When the gavel struck one final time, the judgment etched into law, David knelt to Lily's level. "It's over now, sweetheart. You're safe. You and Noah are safe." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of release. She whispered, "We're really going home now, aren't we?"
David nodded, pulling her close. Yes. From now on, home is wherever we are together. The gallery emptied slowly, but David lingered. He glanced at Maggie, who handed Noah back to him, her face soft with relief. You kept your promise to Grace, she said quietly. David shook his head. No. We kept it together. And as he carried his children out of the courthouse, the cold Manhattan air hit his face like a baptism. For the first time in too long, he felt alive, not as a businessman, not as a millionaire, but as a father who had finally chosen what truly mattered. 2 years later, the skyline of New York shimmered behind them like a distant memory. The towers of glass and steel that had once defined David Reynolds's life were still there, proud and untouchable, but David no longer measured his worth in their height. He had traded penthouse ceilings for open skies and Wall Street meetings for evenings in a quiet garden outside Boston. The property was modest compared to the empire he had once commanded, but it was alive in ways his old world had never been. A small white house stood at the edge of the yard, its windows glowing with warm light. Beyond it, a patch of earth bloomed with color, rows of tomatoes, sunflowers, herbs, and climbing roses. It was not just a garden. It was a promise kept. The hand-painted wooden sign at its entrance read, Mama Grace's Garden. On this late summer evening, Lily, now 8 years old, knelt in the soil, her hands stained with earth as she gently pressed tomato shoots into place. Her laughter, soft but confident, drifted on the breeze. Beside her, Noah, toddling at 2.5, clutched a watering can far too large for his small frame, splashing more water on his shoes than the plants. David stood watching them from the porch, sleeves rolled up, a wooden spoon still in his hand from stirring dinner. The scent of roasted vegetables wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the earthy perfume of the garden. For the first time in a long time, his home was not made of wealth or marble. It was made of peace. "Dad," Lily called, waving proudly. "Look, these are the first tomatoes. Mama Grace would be so happy." The name still caught in his chest, but it no longer tore at him. Instead, it warmed him, like sunlight after a long storm. He stepped down into the garden, crouching beside his children. "She would be proud of you, Lily. Both of you." Noah looked up with a grin, dirt smeared across his cheeks. "Tomatoes, Daddy!" he shouted, as though he'd just discovered treasure. David laughed, pulling both children close. "Yes, son. Tomatoes." As the evening deepened, the three of them carried baskets of vegetables back inside. The kitchen was filled with the sound of clattering pans and Noah's giggles. Lily stood on a stool, stirring sauce under her father's careful watch, while Noah sat on the counter banging a wooden spoon like a drum. Dinner was simple. Pasta with the first tomatoes from their garden, bread Maggie had baked earlier that day, and a salad sprinkled with herbs Lily had picked herself. The three of them sat at the wooden table, the light of the setting sun slanting through the windows, painting everything in gold. Lily took a bite, her eyes sparkling. "Dad, it tastes different when we grow it ourselves. Like it's happier food." David's throat tightened. He set down his fork, watching his daughter speak with such wisdom beyond her years. Grace's voice echoed in his heart. The words from her letter, "Believe in your child's eyes when she is afraid." Tonight, those same eyes shone not with fear, but with hope. He reached across the table, taking Lily's hand in his. "You're right, sweetheart. This food carries love in it, and that makes it better than anything money can buy." Silence settled for a moment. Not heavy, but healing. The kind of silence filled with gratitude. Lily's gaze lifted to her father, her voice soft. "Dad, now we're really a family, aren't we?" David's breath caught. He looked at her, then at Noah smearing tomato sauce across his cheek, and felt tears prick his eyes. He stood, walked around the table, and pulled both children into his arms. "Yes," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Now we're really a family. And we always will be." The three of them held each other close as the light dimmed outside, shadows lengthening across the garden that bore Grace's name. Later, after the children had drifted to sleep, David stepped outside into the night air. The garden lay quiet beneath the stars, its rows a tapestry of new life. Fireflies flickered like tiny lanterns among the plants. He walked to the wooden sign and rested his hand on it. "Grace," he murmured, eyes lifting to the heavens. "I kept my promise." For a long time he stood there in the silence, the weight of the past finally eased. The echoes of fear, the cries in the living room, the court battles, all of it seemed distant now. What remained was a garden, a father, and two children who would never again doubt they were safe, loved, and home. In the stillness, David smiled. His empire was no longer measured in skyscrapers. His legacy was not in contracts or fortunes. It was here, in the laughter of Lily and Noah, in the soil that gave back life, and in the memory of the woman who had loved them first. The wind rustled the leaves, carrying with it a sense of peace. And for the first time since Grace's passing, David felt whole. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this healing journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Your support means the world, and together we'll keep sharing stories of love, hope, and second chances, and